Again, great thanks to Graham and to Stuart Grant, who's in the audience for all the work they've done on this stuff. So I presented to you the sort of cautionary tale around the data manipulation and on-pump versus off-pump surgery. And the story here is that I had a chat with Graham about it, and I said, can you have a quick look at this? Can you reproduce the signal from the data, which is what he did, and he found he couldn't reproduce the signal from the data, which is when we then looked at the processing thing. So this is an interesting and important area, and I'd just like to be very clear, we don't consider this to be a finished analysis. This is a sort of a working draft, if you like, but we thought it'd be interesting to show to people today, to put the record straight if anybody had heard misinformation from the previous work, but this will be worked through fully. It will be worked through fully by Dominic and Nick Fremantle, but we'd like to show you what we've got, which we think is good, but it's not a definitive, finished statistical work. So we took a complete extract of the data, and we looked, again, because we were just seeing if we could pick up the same signal, at the procedure dates from April 2008 to March 2011, isolated first-time coronary artery surgery only, and we had a big sample size. That's over the whole time, actually, 236,000. So this is the incidence of the off-pump treatment variable. So people started doing, I guess, Gianni, that was probably you, wasn't it, back in 1998? And then more recently, about 20% of people have been, 20% of cases have been done off-pump in the last. And again, this is the proportion of patients which were done off-pump by the different hospitals. So the average overall was about 20%, but you know, in some hospitals they're doing over 60%. So that's the variation by hospital across the UK. So in the Blue Book, we did some work on this. Owen Nicholas, a statistician who was working with us at that particular time, did some logistic regression modelling and produced a couple of models which we put in that. And what we did is we just took those models and we applied them to the data set, and we looked at centre mortality as a random effect. And again, the in-hospital mortality overall was 1.7%, for on-pump surgery it was 1.8%, and for off-pump surgery it was 1.3%. And the odds ratio for the treatment variable on pump was 1.5, which was a statistically significant finding. So this suggested on the logistic regression of that data set that on-pump surgery was associated with a higher in-hospital mortality after adjusting for the patient characteristics. So did some propensity matching on this, matching 9,500 patients off-pump to the same number on pump, and we excluded some hospitals from that propensity matching, which were the very high volume off-pump surgeons, and the matching covariates are given there. And the chart on the right there shows the percentage of off-pump prior to matching and after matching. So you can see the blue dots are sort of scattered around the 50%, but you know it's not perfect across the hospitals. And again, that's the random effect from hospital mortality, which went into the model as well. And by doing this, the odds ratio for on-pump was 1.6. And again, that was a statistically significant finding. So using a propensity matching thing, we were getting a similar picture to doing the logistic regression on the whole data set, suggesting that on-pump. So one of the reasons why we started looking at this from our data set in the first place is when we did this in the Blue Book, we saw these lines crossing over. And so there seemed to be this effect whereby there was a slightly higher mortality associated with on-pump surgery in the short term, but the lines crossed, suggesting a slightly better outcome from on-pump surgery in the longer term. And if you just look at that overall, the hazard ratio for on-pump is 1, so there's no significant effect. But because the lines cross, the sort of proportional hazards are obviously invalid there, and that's on the full data set. And looking at the propensity match data set, that's as shown there. And what we did is we started the survival analysis from the time of discharge, and that's what's shown on the right there. So the reason the proportional hazards don't work is because you have the differential mortality in the early stage and then things change after that. But if you do it by looking at survival from the time of discharge, there is no difference in survival. going out to 3 years, and that's the sort of the results for that. So on pump was not a significant effect in this. Increasing age was, ejection fraction was. That we looked at, off-pump surgery associated with lower in-hospital mortality after adjustment. The survival curves cross. The propensity matched survival analysis suggested no difference in survival out to 3 years. But we want to do a fully worked-up analysis out to 10 years, and we want to look to see whether there's an interaction between bilateral mammary usage, which we'll show a bit later in the day. So, anyway, we thought we would leave it at that, but we had a meeting on Monday, and we thought, well, we've got the data, should we look it out to the end of time that we've got to see what that shows. So Graham kindly crunched that, and we got this data back yesterday. So when we looked at that time, so if you look at the chart on the right, so this is going out to a maximum follow-up of 13 years. Again, in this analysis, which we would want to do more before we would suggest to you as a definitive result, shows no difference in survival between on-pump and off-pump surgery going out to 13 years. Thank you.
Ben and Graham, great work on behalf of the Society. Ben, can you just clarify for me, did you say that in the propensity matching you eliminated the high volume off-pump surgeons?
We've done that in the mammary stuff. We haven't done that for this. We did this, as I described, to sense check something which we had some concerns about. But that definitive analysis is going to be done by Dominic and Nick Fremantle, and that's when they will do all that kind of stuff in there. We've done some of that stuff for the bilateral mammaries, which we'll show in a while. Thanks.
Any questions for Ben? But we won't take too many questions, maybe 2 quick questions, and then we'll try and keep them for the common discussion. On you go, please. Can you say who you are and where you're from, everyone? Thanks. Yeah.
To get the questions.
Dumba Ngage from Basildon Hospital. I'm actually very interested because I'm presenting a similar data tomorrow, which essentially agrees with this, but we were not comparing the 2 procedures. But one thing I noticed from looking at the database is that some of conversion from off-pump to on-pump is not clearly indicated for all patients. And we know that conversion from off to on-pump has an adverse effect on the outcome. And because it's a retrospective data, it's difficult to capture all the patients who were converted from off-pump to on-pump. That's question number 1. And the other one is just an observation that in centers that are not high-volume off-pump centers, there is a cherry picking for patients who are taken for off-pump. And some of those variables are not accounted for in the propensity matching. So I think those are some of the things that might impact on the results as well.
You are absolutely right, and I agree with you on both points.
David?
Yeah, David Gilner from Brussels, Belgium. First of all, I congratulate you for your wonderful work. Unfortunately, we can't have such work in Belgium. It's really a pity. My single question is, how did you get in 1 week the follow-up of 13 years for all these patients?
Stuart phoned everybody up. No, all our data, we collect NHS numbers on all the patients, and that then their mortality is tracked nationally through the Office of National Statistics.
Okay. Thank you.
Vipin Zamwa from Edinburgh. I think for the in-hospital mortality, you can say the data would be very valid, very robust. But 13-year follow-up data, how much can you trust that data?
We don't think that ONS mortality tracking is perfect, but we think it's really very good. I mean, if people die, that gets recorded by the Office of National Statistics, and if the NHS number is valid, we track that. We do know that it's not perfect because we have had some patients who basically have died after their operation and then been found to be alive 5 years later. That may be excellent surgery going on in Edinburgh that does that to people. But that we do know that happens every now and then, but we think it's a pretty small effect. So I am pretty confident that the ONS mortality tracking is pretty robust.
Okay.
Thanks, Ben.
Thank you, Ben.